This is one of the most disturbing cases of betrayal, and it's mind-boggling that someone could do this to their own family. On July 12, 2009, Florida heir Ben Novack is found brutally bludgeoned and hogtied with both of his eyes gouged out inside of his New York hotel suite. This grisly scene is discovered by Ben's wife Narcy, who we met years prior at a adult-style clothing optional club. Narcy was a single mother to a daughter named May, and very quickly Ben began to consider May to be his own daughter and would take her under his wing even as she grew up as an adult and would bring her into his hotel business. So when news breaks about Ben's death, she's devastated since Ben was like a father to her. And she vividly remembers the day that her mother and her had to go to the medical examiner's office to identify Ben's body. Given the brutal death of being beaten and having both eyes removed, it's absolutely horrific for May to see her father like this. Immediately, she starts to get physically sick and begins to throw up in a garbage can, and she remembers that as her head was in the bucket, she looks up at her mother, who is just staring down at Ben's body, completely emotionless. Detectives also notice this and are immediately suspicious of Narcy's behavior. And when detectives question her about her whereabouts the night before this all took place, she tells investigators that Ben had stayed up the entire night working since the company was hosting a huge event at the hotel's convention center later that day. And that Ben didn't go to bed until 6:30 that morning, and when she left the hotel room at 7 a.m. to head downstairs for breakfast, Ben was still in bed asleep. Detectives check the security footage from the hotel and confirm her statement. Next, investigators review the hotel's door key card activity and see that no one used the key to open the door between 12 a.m. to 7:40 a.m. that morning, which meant that whoever did this to Ben was physically let inside of the room. Given this, police ask Narcy and her daughter May to take a lie detector test. Both women agree, and wife Narcy fails horribly, but still there wasn't enough evidence to prove what exactly happened. But when May finds out that her mother failed the lie detector test, she becomes even more suspicious. So when the two ladies fly back to their home in Florida, May begins to go through Ben's office to look for any evidence. And while she's doing this, this is when her mother barges into the office with a crowbar and begins to beat her with it, screaming, "Traitor." Regardless of this, time continues to pass and the case still isn't solved. It's not until a Miami police officer randomly gets sent an anonymous letter written in Spanish that cracks the case wide open. Since in the letter it discloses that wife Narcy had used her brother to hire two hitmen to take Ben out so she could inherit his $10 million estate. When detectives start to dig, they do in fact find wire transfers to another man in Miami named Alejandro Garcia, and when they dig on him, they discover that this man has permanent eye damage and regularly wears sunglasses at all times throughout the day. Knowing this, they review the hotel security footage again, and this time they're able to identify Alejandro walking into the hotel that morning alongside another man, and Alejandro is in fact wearing sunglasses. Although moments later when the two men leave the hotel, he's no longer wearing them, and this explains why a broken piece of sunglasses was actually found among the bloody mess near Ben's body. Since during the attack, Ben attempted to defend himself and in the process breaks the attacker's glasses. When police approach Alejandro with the evidence, he agrees to take a plea deal and he will testify against Narcy and her brother, and this is when he states that on the morning of the murder, Narcy herself was the one who opened the hotel room door for the killers to come inside. And Narcy actually stayed to watch as the two men beat her husband and then instructed them to gouge his eyes out because allegedly he was having an affair. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Garcia also tells detectives that 3 months earlier, Narcy also hired him to take out Ben's 87-year-old mother, whose death was originally determined to be from an accidental fall, when really she was beaten to death. This was done so Narcy wouldn't have to split her inheritance with Ben's living mother, and then on top of this, Narcy also hired the same hitman to carry out a third attack against her own daughter, May. In the end, Narcy and her brother were both convicted of racketeering and also found guilty of conspiracy for Ben and his mother's murder. Both were sentenced to life in prison, and thankfully the plot to harm May was uncovered before any additional damage was done. Talk about motherly love, huh?